So, hello, YouTube. Hello. I wanted to talk today about terrorism. This is a big issue at the moment. It's been a big issue for a while. Um, Now, first of all, I think it was last week, we here in Melbourne, we had a terrible incident, which, uh, for those that don't know, if you're not in Melbourne or if you were in Melbourne and weren't paying attention, what happened was that there was a guy, I think he was from Somalia, and he drove a car into all around the city, Melbourne City CBD, and a gas tank exploded while he was driving. He did that on purpose to draw attention to him for getting innocent passers-by to go past and say, "Hey, do you need help?" And then he stabbed them and killed them. Now, he only managed to kill one person. I'm not going to go into details about that. You can look it up if you want to. But suffice to say, that guy was what we call a good Samaritan who was trying to help him out, and he got killed for it. Now, I've had my discussion about what is evil. That's evil. There shouldn't be anyone out there that believes that that's not evil. Um, Now there was only one person killed, which was fantastic. I think it says a lot about Melbourne that even though there was only one perpetrator, that we only had one person die. We had two other people stabbed as well, so three people total. We had a man with a trolley that attacked him, had another man with a chair that attacked this terrorist, and then police came along and they shot and killed him. And the trolley man, I'm just going to say, I believe he was a hero. And the chairman, who we don't know who that was, I think he was probably a hero as well. And some people have said that the person that was stabbed that died was also a hero. Um, I don't know that much about it, but certainly he, I think we can say very clearly that he was doing a good thing to try to help somebody. Whether that makes him a hero, I think that's probably the wrong word, but it's a good thing that he did. He tried his best, and I've gone over that in my good versus evil video. That's definitely a good thing to do, and you know that I went to his shop once in 2009, and he was a wonderful person, and he was nice to talk to. He was very animated, a friendly guy, and I mean, to be killed for helping someone, it's very evil. I don't think there's any way that anyone can justify that, and for ISIS to be supporting that, with I don't care whether he really was ISIS or not. I wouldn't support that. I wouldn't put my name to someone doing something as evil as that. And I think any terrorist group, you're not going to recruit people based on the idea that you're doing something as evil as that, that you're supporting someone doing something as evil as that. I think anyone that's going to be attracted to that is evil. So, um, so that's the basis, if you like, for this video. Well, that's the topical part of it. We've had confirmation that that was terrorism. Now it's the third car-related attack in Melbourne in 2 years. The other two, some people thought of as terrorism. Officially, they're not. Neither of them. So what, they were both, for those people not aware, December last year and January last year. We had people drive their cars around and hitting people, killing people, injuring people. They were both considered to be road rage or some other motivation other than terrorism. And I think I said this previously, my good versus evil thing. I think that the cars going around thing was more amoral, and I think that the terrorist attack was more immoral. So in a lot of ways, the cars ones were worse because the people there don't even think they did anything wrong. The guy that was there with the knives and with the bomb going off, he knew what he was doing was wrong, and he did it. And so that's terrorism. So I wanted to just start that off with that. What can we do about it is the next question. And now I think that we have to get right back to the heart of what is terrorism before we can address that. So what is terrorism? So terrorism has existed for thousands of years. It's not a new idea. It's not a new concept. So even in ancient Rome, they had terrorists. Now I don't think they used that term, but they certainly had people that would fit the modern day definition. So when you had Julius Caesar taking over Britain, all that sort of stuff, you had people both within Rome and within the conquered forces, so within Britain or within France or whichever country was taken over by Rome, that would resist that, and that they would do they would launch attacks, and some of those attacks would kill people, and some of those attacks would kill innocent people. They weren't all attacking Roman soldiers. I mean, that's the aim, but because of the way they were oppressed, they did attack and kill and murder and mayhem for innocent people. So that was terrorism. It was there. As far as I know, it was always existed. We've always had terrorism. So what is terrorism? It's basically terrorism is a protest. Okay, so when something's happened that you don't agree with, um, you have two types of protests. You have the marching in the street type, and you have the throwing bombs type. Now they're essentially the same motivation, but different. So terrorism is a violent protest, and we've actually seen this that we've had. I mean, most people know Greenpeace and Amnesty International. They're peaceful protests. Now there are people that do violent versions for the same reason, and we've had people that have gone around attacking ships in the sea because, well, they might be whalers, they might be doing something that they believe is wrong, so they've murdered people, and so that's terrorism. Now we don't always draw attention to that. We don't always say they're terrorists, and in fact, there's terrorism is not a black and white thing always. I mean, not everyone has the same view of what terrorism is. Some of these Greenpeace and Amnesty International type terrorists, and I'm not saying Greenpeace or Amnesty International terrorists, but the people that do the same things but with a violent and murderous view of it. Right? So just making it clear, I'm not calling Amnesty International or Greenpeace terrorists, but I am calling certain other ones that I'm not going to name here, but that murder people for the same reason. So instead of protesting, they're murdering. But some people still regard those people as still the same as Amnesty International and still the same as Greenpeace when they're murdering people. And so in some countries they're called terrorists, in some countries they're not. I wanted to give some examples of people that I think would fit the modern day definition of terrorism, but who, at least we in Australia, consider as good people. So one of them that a lot of people note is Nelson Mandela. Now, we've got a musical out right now celebrating his life. Nelson Mandela was at the time considered a terrorist, and I think today would still be considered a terrorist. His group, they were protesting racism in South Africa, which is a valid. I mean, obviously, it was a terrible thing. We had apartheid, and so they had a valid reason to form a terrorist group or form a protest group. So they had protesting, and then they had violent protesting. Now, some of the violent protesting killed innocent people, and Nelson Mandela was a part of that. His group killed, I think it was about 40 people. So Nelson Mandela and his group were terrorists. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say that he was overall a completely evil man, but what I'm going to say, and this is what I'm pointing out here, is that you've got a lot of people are told as black and white that all terrorists are evil, all terrorist views are evil, everything's evil. You've got Nelson Mandela there. How good was he for South Africa in the end? It was fantastic. He's fantastic for the world, but he still did kill, or his organisation at least, killed a number of people that were innocent civilians. I mean, he wasn't just killing racist, evil dictators. He was killing, and they were killing, innocent, random people. Now, here's one example. Che Guevara is another one. It's from South America. A lot of people thought of him as a freedom fighter, a fantastic man. And in USA today, he's generally regarded as a terrorist, even now. And that's another one. And that was a communist leader, obviously. Vladimir Lenin's another one. He led the communist movement in Russia. And there's no question that he was a terrorist. He murdered lots and lots and lots of people, but helped Russia. And I mean, successful terrorist, perhaps we can say, because he ended up being the leader of Russia and he was the start of the Soviet Union. And we've got a number of these examples of people throughout history that have done things that fit the definition of terrorism and were known in history as good people. And so that's something that's a little bit grey in the whole thing. Now, another one I just wanted to say. So in Sri Lanka, they had what they called the Tamil Tigers. Now, at the time that the Tamil Tigers were doing it, here in Australia, they were regarded as good people. We all our press in Australia said Tamil Tigers were good. We were letting Tamil race people from Sri Lanka come into Australia as refugees just automatically because they were being oppressed because of that. And that was about a racism issue, about the Sinhalese majority Sri Lankan government, who were, at least in their view, they were racially abusing the Tamils. And so the Tamils decided to start this terrorist group. And it was a terrorist group. I mean, I was hearing, and I know in the 1990s and late 1980s, I was hearing them say, oh, the Tamil Tigers, they're freedom fighters, they're guerrillas, they're good people. And I was still saying, well, they're terrorists. Clearly, they're terrorists. Had they won, and there was a time there was a chance they were going to win. Had they won and assumed leadership or at least influenced leadership, which was their aim, and they'd had a Tamil majority government or at least part of the government, which was their aim. Had that happened, we wouldn't have had the concentration camps that they had afterwards, where they had everybody in Sri Lanka who was Tamil was put in these camps. I guess they were to make sure that they weren't terrorists. So that they're released after a while, they're all good, all fine. And I mean, we have to sort of look at that and say that's terrorism. So when we're looking at this Somalian guy that did this evil act, and ISIS who approved it, how evil is that for ISIS to approve an evil act? Very evil. But when we look at that, we've got to sort of think in context, and we've got to say, well, excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so but when we look at that, we've got to sort of think of it in terms of what terrorism is as a whole, and it is a grey area. It's not a black and white. People have been called terrorists that weren't terrorists. People have been domestic terrorists that weren't. We have this debate. The first two cars in Melbourne, a lot of people said that they were terrorism, and some people said they weren't. Officially, they weren't, because ISIS didn't say that they were terrorists, and that's sort of the definition. But even when we look at 9/11, Al-Qaeda, who was said to have organised it, never at any stage, at least not freely, did they say that they planned it. So how is that a terrorist act? It was a bad act. Oh, goodness gracious, man. I think it was terrorism, but I don't think it was Al-Qaeda. And I can put that in another video if you like. I think it was ISIS, or what became ISIS, that they were to do with 9/11. But that's a different issue. So, you know, that was terrorism. I'm fairly confident with that. But that's the thing. Like, we go around and sometimes we say, all right, well, we changed the rules. The rules has always been, if a terrorist group accepts responsibility, then it's terrorism. If they don't accept responsibility, it's not. We had 9/11 when no terrorist group accepts responsibility, and yet we call it terrorism. I mean, what's the rule? What's the definition? How can we say that was terrorism? How can we say what the aim was? We don't need. I mean, people have speculated what the aim was. Was the aim to scare things up? So, I mean, when we look at all these different terrorism things, we sort of, we're getting a bit confused. And now there's this idea of Islamic terrorism. Now, that the concept of Islamic terrorism didn't exist until reasonably recently. And like I've said to a few people, when I was growing up, Muslims were not considered evil. They was considered to be the same as anyone else. It wasn't a thing. It was, so, like, for example, one of my cartoon shows I used to watch as a child, called Arabian Nights, and that was based in Baghdad in Iraq. We had people going around, and they were the heroes. So I said, "Oh, I want to be like this guy," and I mean that was similar sort of thing to Aladdin, but it was based on the whole group of stories. So I think it's called Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, or 1001 Arabian Nights, or it's those stories. It's more than just Aladdin, but it's those stories as a whole with a group of it, and they're not Muslim stories, well, a little bit, but they're more Arabic stories, and we consider them to be good. We used to have Arabs in Hollywood movies all the time, and we were considering them. Well, they're good, they're nice, we like them, and then suddenly they didn't decide to become terrorists just to be stupid. There was an event that happened, and the event was called the Iraq War. And what I'm talking about that is the US invasion of Iraq. Uh, Now, it's around 1990, 1991 sort of thing. And so what happened was that Saddam Hussein, who's the head of Iraq, he said that he would annex the country of Kuwait. Now, if people don't understand what annexation is, it's basically where rather than having a war, they just say, hey, knock, knock, hello, we're a lot bigger than you, give us your country. And that's what happened. Kuwait weren't slaughtered, they weren't invaded. They gave up their country to a much larger force. Now, there are international rules about that, how you can do it, how you can't, and Iraq followed the rules. They legitimately took possession of Kuwait. Now, I'm sure there's people in Kuwait that weren't happy with it, but it wasn't an invasion, it wasn't an attack, it wasn't illegal. Now, I'm here in Australia. We've got 25 million people. Next door to us is Indonesia with 300 million. Indonesia could well, one day, knock, knock, hello, Australia, we'd like you to be part of Indonesia. And most likely we would say, yeah, okay, because we're smaller, we're weaker. But we might be able to fight them. But let's say another example, if China, with 1.7 billion, I think it is now, they said, hey, hey, Australia, guess what? We want you to be part of China. There'd be no way we could fight China. Or USA. If USA went, knock, knock, well, we wouldn't fight them because they're overwhelming forces. We might fight Indonesia because even though they're 10 times as big, we do have strong missiles and strong military. But even still, Kuwait, much smaller than Iraq. So Kuwait were never going to fight. And so they were annexed. Now, a similar one also we had in Russia. They annexed part of Ukraine recently. Nobody got upset about that. I mean, people were in the news and they're saying, well, I don't know if that's right. So that was the situation. Now, the justification for USA to go to war was zero. Okay. Yeah, there was a petition by the King of Kuwait afterwards, and I'm not sure how genuinely we can take it, but he did go to the United Nations and said, please come and free our people. And so they went there, they invaded. Eventually originally United Nations said no to them. Then eventually they agreed to not object to it. And then they found out that Saddam Hussein had been genocide against the Kurdish people, which was a race within Iraq. And so that justified it, even though we didn't know about it at the time. It was later on. We had no justification, went in there. Oh, we had a justification after we were already gone. You know, and that was unfair. So we talk about unfairness creating these problems. That was an unfairness. If we had it to do again, and I think if we knew what was going to happen as a result of that, we would say, okay, let's just not invade. We could have easily offered sanctuary for people of Kuwait who wanted to flee, allowed them to move to other countries if they wanted to. I didn't even see any evidence that they were being abused. The Kurds were, but the Kuwaitis seemed to be living reasonably well after the Iraqi invasion. Iraqi annexation, I should say, not an invasion. So one of the things was we were talking about Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda didn't exist until that happened. Al Qaeda began as a result of a complaint by a fellow called Osama bin Laden. We probably know him, which was when they had tanks. I shouldn't say tanks, but they had American military in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is important to the Muslim people of the world because of a city or an area of Saudi Arabia called Mecca. which is like their equivalent of Jerusalem to Christians and to Jews. Anyway, it's certainly it's a big important area, and having people that weren't Muslim go there just so callously, it really offended them. And I think most people would agree that it didn't have to happen. We in Australia have similar conditions to in Saudi Arabia, at least within our deserts. They could have easily trained in Australia, and I mean around Alice Springs and the different deserts around there, we were allowing them to train here, and that would have been less offensive. They could have trained here and shot from perhaps Iran or some other country, and or just gone straight into Iraq. And it was just really callous and unfair. And they were asked before Al Qaeda started. Osama bin Laden went on TV and said, "Please don't go to Saudi Arabia." And they begged them, and he wasn't the only one. There were like 20, 30 of them, and they still came anyway. And so because they didn't come, they formed Al Qaeda. Now, the original aim of Al Qaeda was to stop the American invasion of these countries. And it was terrorists, but they were attacking American soldiers overseas. They bombed it was a USS Cole. It's a ship that was delivering oil in the area, and that was Al Qaeda, and that was terrorism. People in that ship were, I mean, they weren't civilians, but they were military people that weren't consciously doing anything to attack them. They were just delivering oil, and it was terrorism, but that was the start of it. So when we look at that, and then we look at the idea that they could have or would have 9/11, I don't think it's likely. Some people have said, well, they might have changed their ideas. They didn't. That's not Al Qaeda before and afterwards, but always attacking US interests overseas. They wouldn't attack USA itself. They said very clearly they wouldn't do that. ISIS would. Al Qaeda wouldn't. So we've got a difference of ideology, if you like. And they're not the same group. They didn't link to each other. They were in opposition to each other. Because ISIS, one of the fundamental parts of ISIS was attacking sovereign countries such as USA, whereas Al Qaeda was only interested in stopping them from taking over their own country. So stopping USA from taking over Iraq, for example, or Afghanistan. And that was Al Qaeda's aim. Now, what we've done there, so we've got these terrorists there, and we say, okay, why did you start? This is what we should be doing. Saying, why have you started? So we've got the Tamil Tigers. Why did they start? They started because there was some racism in Sri Lanka. Why did Nelson Mandela's lot start in South Africa? It was because there was racism in South Africa. Why did Al Qaeda start? Because America was invading other countries for no good reason, and they were in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, being disrespectful. And they're things that really happened. There's no disputing that happened. That did definitely happen. And that's the reason for those terrorist groups to start. Why did the Greenpeace-related terrorist attacks start? Because they didn't like the Japanese whaling vessels. And so they've all got a reason. And so when we're talking about how do we deal with terrorism, you've got to think, well, couldn't we just stop doing these things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? And that seems fairly obvious. That, for example, we could withdraw all troops from Afghanistan and Iraq and anywhere else that we are. And by we, I'm meaning it's mostly America doing it. Please don't.
What?
Hey, okay, so that was my wife. She just barged in. Anyway, so what was I talking about? So, anyway, yeah. So that's the thing. So when we've got the terrorism going on, and we're lost my train of thought a fair bit there, but yeah, when they're coming in, and we've got an obvious solution and that is to stop the cause of it. So take the military out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, out of everywhere that we're doing the wrong thing. And then you'd think, well, whatever they're doing in their own country, they can do in their own country. I mean, I know USA consider themselves the most powerful country in the world, and perhaps they still are in some ways. But I remember there was a cartoon movie that was made called Team America World Police, and it's sort of the idea that USA is the world's police force. No, they're not, but they think they are, and that's sort of a big part of the problem. They're going around, they're interfering. Now, I know in some conspiracy theorist sites, and some people think of me as a conspiracy theorist for some strange reason. I dispute the official story, but I also dispute you conspiracy theorists. So I'm not on either side there. But look, there is this theory going around. I'll have to state it. That's that USA is wanting this terrorism for some strange reason. I don't understand why you'd want it. I don't understand why you'd want somebody to go take a car into the middle of the Melbourne city, set the car on fire with a gas bottle, and then stab somebody that comes to help. I don't see why America would want to encourage that. I don't see why Australia would want to encourage that. I think that if you're thinking along those lines, then you've got to sort of look at what the whole of your argument, and sort of say, hey, I think that somewhere along the lines I've lost track of what reality is. And I mean, there's points to those arguments that make sense, but yeah, when you've got that conclusion and you're saying, oh, why would they want? I mean, there's an argument that yes, the USA took advantage of the 9/11 attacks for their own political aims, and I mean, certainly Afghanistan with the Taliban were against US's interests, and they had a reason to attack Afghanistan that was not related to 9/11. And definitely, no question, the Taliban were trying to kill Christians for being Christian, and that's terrible. That wasn't terrorism, and that was not related to 9/11. It was pretty bad. I mean, they had people on trial. You've been found guilty of being Christian. That's ridiculous. Oh my goodness. And I mean, the United Nations wouldn't support them invading, but I mean, we've got to say, from an international point of view, we can't accept that kind of behaviour. It's just wrong. And Red Cross workers, it was wrong. But at the same time, to suggest that Afghanistan was somehow in league with Al Qaeda and that they were coordinating 9/11 was far-fetched, and it was proven wrong. Nobody today thinks that that's related. Even if you believe that Al Qaeda were the ones that did 9/11, which again I don't think that's true. But even if you think they weren't really related. They were related a little bit, but they weren't. You know. So the invasion of Iraq was under false pretext, and the invasion of Iraq was, the invasion of Afghanistan was, and the second invasion of Iraq was as well, because they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and we always knew they didn't. But so what today? We should have finished. We finished terrorism by now. Haven't we got rid of it all? Is it all gone? What's going on? Why hasn't it not gone? The simple answer is that we've got countries in the Middle East that, before this whole thing started, so 30 years ago, were rich countries. They're richer than Australia. Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, they were some of the richest countries in the world. And now they're poor. And why are they poor? Because of the USA. Because of this attack and these attacks and these related attacks of all these rich countries. You turn rich countries into poor countries. And that's going to encourage people to be angry. And now they can march in the streets, wave their flag and all that. And some of them are going to be violent. So what's the cause? You've got people attacking them, turning rich people into poor people. Now you can say, well, as far as empires are concerned, Britain did that, France did that, Spain did that, Portugal did that, Rome did that. They attacked and killed millions of people back in ancient times. Perfectly okay in those days. And you can say that, and you've got an argument to say America has every right to do that as the richest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world. They have every right to destroy countries. I mean, in a sense, they do. But at the same time, they have done that. I mean, you wouldn't have had Julius Caesar pretending that he wasn't attacking the rest of the world. He would be bragging about it. And today we're not bragging about it because we're trying to hide that it's happening. And this is, in some ways, the way that we do things today, where we're having hidden empires, is having terrorism as a part of it. It's a part of the way we're doing things. If we were doing things in the way that the Romans used to do, the Spanish, the British, the French, Portuguese, and all of the different empires in the past, if we were doing it in the way that they did it, it wouldn't. I mean, they still had terrorists, but it wouldn't be like this because you just kill them all. You just wipe them all out. Instead of just invading Afghanistan, they would have killed everybody there and enslaved the rest. They would have, instead of just going to Iraq and just, killing the inverted commas warriors, they would have killed all the civilians as well. And that's what we've always done in the past. And so I think that realistically, if we're looking at terrorism as a whole, it's a result of the way that we deal with global domination today. So it's the way that we're only talking about USA really because Russia isn't really that powerful. China are they're not really invading anyone. They are powerful, but they're not invading anyone. And I don't think we can blame just USA. I think we can blame the whole system. And we can say, well, we're having terrorists because there's people that have been having their lives ruined for no fault of their own, and they're angry about it. Do we want to blame them? Yes, I do want to blame them when they're going in there and setting off bombs and stabbing people. I'm going to blame them. At the same time, I'm still going to say also, there's sort of two ways to deal with it. We can either kill them all and wipe out. I mean, we know it's currently based in Syria, so we could just destroy the whole of Syria, or we could sit there and just everybody in Syria until we're sure we've got rid of everybody. We could do that. That's one way. The second way, stop being such jerks. Stop invading countries that have done nothing wrong. Stop just turning rich people into poor people. Stop ruining people's lives. Stop doing all these evil things. There's two ways to do it. I mean, we could withdraw from Afghanistan, withdraw from Iraq, withdraw from any other countries that we're in, and by we, I mean USA mainly. That's one way we could deal with it. The other way is to just go in there, wipe them all out. We're going in the middle right now. We're in a middle ground that is not working. It's never going to work. So we've got two ways to do it. Withdraw, attack. Withdraw, attack. There's my hands. I was using my hands on the you can see it. But yeah, so either withdraw all the troops from everywhere and hope that the terrorists stop being terrorists because they go, oh, okay, oh, thank you. Or we can just go in there, kill them all. Even if some of them perhaps are not completely evil, and even if perhaps they have got good motives for doing it, that they think that they're helping their family, their society, their country. And I do talk a bit about Nelson Mandela and all those other ones, but when we've got a car coming in there, setting a bomb off and stabbing people that come to help, it's evil. And if you've got a group that's saying that they accept responsibility for it, it's hard to accept that ISIS is anything other than evil. So I think if people are evil, we should be declaring war with them. So I think that if we had a global war against ISIS and against all the evil terrorism that's out there, I think that's a good thing. I'd support that. I'd support a proper war on terrorism, not just this stupid little thing we're doing now, but a proper one, proper full-scale world war against terrorism. And I'm not saying against Muslims. You don't want to go there, but against terrorism. If we had a full-scale worldwide global offensive against terrorism, I think it'd be a good thing, and I think that would help. I support that. I say good on you, whoever's doing that, whether it's Vladimir Putin, whether it's Donald Trump, and whoever it might be, and whether it's Scott Morrison saying to you Muslim leaders, come out here and meet with me. I mean, meet with him. I don't want to meet with you. I don't know anything about it really. But meet with Scott Morrison and say, hey, let's deal with this. And I think really, if you're a Muslim person, there's 1 billion of you out there. It's 1.5 billion, might even be 2. How many Muslims are terrorists? Let's have a guess. Let's say it's 100,000. Let's say that's 5%. Cut them out of your community. Why should you 95% of you suffer what 5% are doing? I mean, that's a global issue for everybody. Evil is about 5%. So I think while we've got right now the name, the image of Muslims worldwide is tarnished in this way, I think it's important. You go out there and say, all right, everyone who's a terrorist, we're getting rid of you, we're selling you out, and sell them out. Get rid of them from your mosques, from your communities. Get rid of them. Absolutely get rid of them. And in Australia, we'd have them either deported or put in jails for life under the harshest of conditions. All of them. And it doesn't matter if they've done anything or not. I think if they have that ideology, you've got to get rid of them. And that's how we can deal with terrorism. And is it going to work if we just simply withdraw everything? In theory, in practice, probably not. So we shouldn't have gone there in the first place. We have to own that. We've done the wrong thing there. We've caused this. This isn't caused by Muslims. This was caused by those invasions. This was caused by unjustifiable actions. And that's the reality that USA caused global Muslim terrorism. They're to blame for it. And I think that also they need to take a leadership position in finishing it. They caused it. They should get rid of it. We should do our bit too. We have to say, okay, I understand, accept for all you people in Arab countries that have been unfairly treated, all you Muslims that have been unfairly treated, understand that. That doesn't give you the right to drive a car around with a bomb that you set off so that people will come out to help you and then you stab them and kill them. It doesn't give you the right to do that. It doesn't give anyone the right to do that. It's not related. I'm going to feel sorry for you and I'm going to give you sympathy, but you have to return that by not being violent. I know it's tempting to be violent, but don't. Just don't. And if you know anyone that is being violent, sell them out. Sell them out. We need to stop terrorism. It's beyond a joke. So we need to, every person in the world, whether you're Muslim or not, needs to stop terrorism. And it might take a little while to get rid of it all, but that's what we should be doing. And that's the reality of it. So I've never personally met anyone that was Muslim that I thought was evil. I'm sure they exist. I mean, we're told they exist. I have met people that I consider to be evil. They weren't Muslim. So I don't think, from what I know of the Islamic belief system, it's certainly not evil. I consider it very similar to Christianity. And I think realistically, people talk about them as Abrahamic religions. Judaism, if you consider that to be the father, then Islam and Christianity are the children, the brothers or the sisters of each other. And that's the testimony they are. In some ways, Christianity and Islam are both sects of Judaism. So they're all the same religion, with just a few minor differences. And some people say they're major differences as well. Deciding whether Jesus was the Son of God or not is a big deal for a lot of people. Um, deciding whether Muhammad was a genuine prophet or not, it's a big deal. But your basic message is pretty similar. It's the same. It's almost identical. I know someone's going to say, "Oh, well, it's not," but you've all got the golden rule, and it's not. It's not the cause of terrorism. The cause of terrorism is not Islam. It's the invasion of Iraq and other related issues are the cause of the current lot of terrorism. It's not the cause of what happened in Sri Lanka. It's not the cause of what happened in South Africa. It's not the cause of what happened in Northern Ireland. It's not the cause of what happened in South America. They're all different issues. But the current lot of terrorism is caused by the invasion of Iraq, invasion of Afghanistan, and the second invasion of Iraq. And they're the causes, and we need to deal with that. We've got the situation. Let's put a stop to it. Let's everybody that's not a terrorist, particularly Muslims, I think that they should attack everybody who is, and isolate them, draw them out, do what you can. Maybe not personally go up 1 against 100. That might not be very sensible, but do what you can to deal with this. We need to stop it. We need to really seriously stop it. We can't have what happened the other week. We can't have that happen again. And we can't rely on trolley men to be out there, particularly since he got arrested for some burglary or whatever. He might have been a common thief, might have robbed somebody's purse, but that sort of, if you give that point score that I had before, we consider the terrorism thing up there. It could kill somebody, did kill somebody. It's like an 80 or a 90. The Eagles car, robbing someone, about a 2 there, about a 1 there. He's about a 2. So he's done an evil action of 2, but he stopped an evil action of 80 or 90. The trolley man is not an evil person, and I think we need to say, like, if he's robbed somebody because he was starving, he still shouldn't have done it. But I think we can excuse that a lot more than we can excuse someone blowing up a bomb in their car to try to stab somebody and kill them. And for him to stop that person and save so many lives, I think it was a heroic act. I think that we can forgive him for robbing a few people. And I mean, hope that he doesn't rob anyone again, because now we've had that. I think the money raised and all that. I'd hate to think that the next person who's in that situation that's got a shopping trolley is scared to do it because police might arrest them. I think police did the wrong thing. I think police should hang their heads in shame. They should be commending that man, not abusing him, not criticising him, not calling petty things on him. Yeah, so that's my view on terrorism. Then I've said what I think can fix it, and I think it is related to my talk about good and evil, and I think it is also related to a lot of other things about people being dishonest, particularly in the media. And I think if we've got a clear reaction on things and a clear and balanced view on the way the world runs and the way that things are occurring, then we can say it's fairly clear what we should be doing. Again, and I said this in the good versus evil video, is if we've got 95% of people being good, 5% being evil, 95 versus 5, 95 is going to win. And if we take that view on terrorism, this is 5%, and it's probably less than 5%. Terrorism really is like not even 1%. Let's say this is the Muslim community. These are the Muslim terrorists. It's easy. It's really, really easy. They can hide, but there's only so much hiding they can do. I think we can quash it. Now, I don't want to rely on just the Muslim community, but we need the support of the Muslim community to do that. So if you're Muslim out there, do what you can to stop terrorism. You're the main people that can do it. You're the main people that benefit from it. Please do what you can. And if you're not Muslim, please don't attack innocent Muslims. That's the first thing. But do what you can to stop Muslim terrorism. And if we can separate Muslims from terrorists, so we just got terrorists on one side, Muslims on the other, and they're not the same people, we're good. We're good. And we'll deal with this. I don't see this happening forever. It's a new thing. It was caused by some very false advertising in the media and by some people in USA in particular that wanted certain greedy aims. It's going to stop eventually. Al-Qaeda's pretty much stopped. I think we'll stop ISIS, and I don't see another one cropping up once we stopped ISIS. So that's what we've got to do. That's what we'll do. And then we'll be done with, and we can move on to our next world crisis. I want to also think it'd be good to someone to make a movie or a book about Trolley Man. I think that'd be interesting. Okay, bye-bye.